Greetings, diners, and a welcome to a new edition of the Collapse Cafe, which has been missing in action for a couple of years now, since I was doing the regular video interviews with other bloggers and pundits and energy industry professionals and whoever the fuck I could get online. And have been mostly blogging, doing tech stuff. But in the last couple of months, I got back into doing video. I have my Collapse morning wake-up call. It goes off every Sunday. And I hope you have stopped in to watch a couple of those. And my Collapse cooking show called The Cooking Zone, which I do on Saturdays. And I share some observations of Collapse while I share some of my favorite recipes. And the food is very good. You should try some of my recipes. But at any rate, for today, on this new Collapse Cafe, we are discussing, and I say we because if you look next to me now, on the screen, I have an old friend and guest, Jason Heppenstall, who lives in Britain. He is in Cornwall, I think. Is that right, Jason?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And he's a native Brit, although he spent quite a bit of time outside the country. And has written on Brexit and now continues to write on Brexit and its facets. Jason, why don't you tell us what's been going on with you?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to hook up once again. It's been a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was blogging on my blog 22 Billion Energy Slaves for the best part of a decade. And I would say in the last year or so, I haven't really written anything, although I've resurrected it in the last month or so.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I didn't write anything was because I've just been busy. I've been doing other things. I've got a lot of projects on, and I took a break from writing about, doom, and getting on with sort of sorting my own life out and making preparations for things.
Yeah,
so
I think
I'm sort of active, and I thought maybe with all this Brexit stuff like heating up, there's quite a change in the air, certainly in this country. And I thought maybe it was time to start blogging again about these things.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, amongst the older bloggers who've been around a while, there's been a lot of burnout of people, dropping out, a lot of people becoming frustrated, I think, and turning inward, not really getting anywhere in their personal opinion on, informing more people or getting any kind of movement going or anything like that. So, I've seen a lot of dropout of people that I enjoyed reading before. Myself, I don't have a whole lot else to do. As my regular readers know, I suffered an accident, and so I'm mostly crippled and housebound now. And so I sit in my little computer chamber here and observe what's going on in the world around me from here. And so that's how it goes, all right, so let's look at the topic for the day. We've got a vote going down on Brexit, and behind me here, you guys can see Theresa May giving a speech. I think it was earlier today, where she talks about what she's going to do after Brexit, and I hear she's going to resign at some point here. Do you know much about that?
It's only literally just come up on the news a few minutes ago, but it seems to be that a lot of her MPs are not willing to carry on working with her, and she desperately wants them to vote for her deal, her Brexit deal, which is kind of a very watered down, wishy-washy kind of a Brexit deal, which most people are, pretty against. And it's come down to the wire now because I think we're going to get basically kicked out of the EU the day after tomorrow, unless we come up with something. So the heat is on. So a few of the so-called Brexiteers have agreed to back her, but only if she quits. So I think she's just said, oh, she will quit, or she'll think about quitting, or something like that.
Yeah,
So that's the deal, as far as I can tell.
The plan, such as it is or was or whatever, seemed to be for Theresa just to keep scheduling votes until she got people to vote the way she wanted, which just was not in the cards. And I don't see why, this will make it any more in the cards either. I mean, she might get a few more people voting for it, but it was so overwhelmingly rejected on the previous two occasions that it's just hard to imagine how it could possibly pass this time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at her deal, it's pretty awful. I mean, it's like, to start, we would have to pay the EU £39 billion straight off at some sort of fine for leaving the club. There would be at least 21 months where we would kind of we would effectively be a vassal state because we would have to take orders and rules, but we would have no way of changing it. And then there's this whole backstop issue. I don't know if you know about that. It's basically
with Ireland and
sacrificing Northern Ireland for a while, some sort of temporary solution, allegedly. But obviously, people are unhappy with it, and it's come down to the wire. And now people are saying, the people that were really against it are seemingly getting behind us just to prevent a Brexit being abandoned. And if that was to happen, I can't even imagine the consequences in this country. I mean, we've got the yellow vest in France. I don't know what we would have here.
The yellow vest is another topic I want to cover in detail. So so let's hold off on going too much into that right now. I want to see what we can do, getting in depth on the Brexit issue. The whole backstop business with Ireland. Now, one thing I've read is that that in the event of Brexit, and then I think Northern Ireland is supposed to hang with the EU and remain a part of the EU, while the rest of Ireland goes with England into the UK, that would instigate or begin the Troubles again, that might become an issue. Have you heard anything, or do you foresee any major political problems that will manifest themselves if the Brexit goes through and so forth?
Well, the fear was always that there would be like a hard border with troops on it, which is basically what there was during the days of the Troubles. So that's the idea behind the backstop. The idea behind the backstop is that, trucks and vans and people with donkeys can move about the entire island of Ireland without needing to worry about the border. Northern Ireland would effectively be part of the EU, even though it's still part of the UK. And as you may know, Theresa May, her party is only in power because they've got the support of the Northern Irish Party, the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, and they don't want to see their country kind of sacrificed to the EU, so they're putting up a lot of resistance. So even though there's only 10 of them in Parliament, Theresa May has to kind of get them on board for anything to pass, because otherwise they can just veto everything. So they're a small political party, and there's only a few of them, but they've got a lot of power over Theresa May. And that's the whole problem. She can't please everybody. There's no way of pleasing everybody with Brexit. Somebody's going to have to, eat the losses, and it's just a question of who.
Right. And the problem is that, in the parliamentary system with, not just two parties, but several different ones, with everybody with a somewhat different spin and different ideas, getting any kind of consensus or agreement amongst all those parties uh, seems hopeless at times. Now, one of the things you mentioned there was that Theresa May is only in power by virtue of the fact that she has the support of the group in Northern Ireland or whatever. Once these various factions fracture up, which they are bound to do, where do you see Jeremy Corbyn and Labour going? Do you see any possibility for Labour getting control of the government?
It's really hard to say at this point because both of the main parties, Labour and the Conservatives, they're both being pulled two separate ways. They've both got their kind of traditional backers, and yet both parties are trying to kind of be a sort of neoliberal, big business pleasing, kind of version of the US Democratic Party, really.
Yeah, so there isn't a whole lot of difference. We got clown shows in both countries going on.
Yeah, we've got a big clown show going on. And I think that's the main thing about Brexit, is it's ripping everything apart. It's ripping all the big parties into pieces. And I don't know what the political landscape is going to look like after this. I mean, it's impossible to say. It just changes day by day.
Well, it'll certainly be a whole lot different if there's a no-deal Brexit. If that happens, everybody predicts basically complete mayhem. At least all the economics people that I've read, that it will be just, incomprehensible, the fallout, in terms of loss of trade and all sorts of nonsense. So, once that goes down, I think things will change dramatically. If that goes down, that's a big if, because every time you think it's on the brink, they kick the can again. And so, that seems to be the case everywhere, all the time, and you just wonder, when the can no longer be kicked. It's pretty hard to see where they're going to go from here, but I've been surprised a few times, so it's hard to say. All right, I want to bring up another star of the original Brexit hearing. Let me bring him up on the screen here behind me so we have a little backdrop. Okay. And it's our good old friend, and he should be on here momentarily, Nigel Farage, or Farage, or how the hell does he pronounce that last name?
I think it's Farage.
Yeah, it is Farage. Okay, there he is. He has not been seen or heard from too much of late, or in the interim since the whole Brexit shit went down, and he kind of left the whole business behind. Once he got that thing going, and what do you make of his reappearance now? Apparently, he's took issue with a poll that came out that I think says that the Brits now favor staying in the EU. That they would, if given the chance to vote again, that they would turn Brexit down. Do you think that's a plausible scenario, that another vote will be taken, or another referendum?
I personally don't think there'll be another referendum, because this one caused so much trouble. I think if there is another one, there's a good chance that the result will be exactly the same. They will try their hardest. When I say they, I mean the media and the political classes will try their hardest to continue to, with their Project Sphere, to try and make people vote the right way this time. But I don't think it's going to go down very well. I mean, I've seen several polls, and they all indicate opposite things. So I think we've moved into the age where polls are not really that useful anymore. I don't know the reason for that. Maybe people lie on them, or maybe the methodology is just outdated. But it depends what newspaper you read. I mean, they all go with their own favoured poll results. So.
Right. I think it's, the division lines are carefully engineered and have been for a long time, so that these kind of questions are always a very narrow margin, and then any polling agency can simply skew who they poll and what their selection is of respondents to get the result that they want. And so the polls are not so much a real tool of mathematics as they are a tool of propaganda. And, if the polls say that you're winning, then it changes the mass psychology. People say, oh, that's the winning side. People always want to be on the winning side,
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you that polls and polls validity aren't real great anymore. And I'm doing something here that you don't see too often. I'm smoking on camera. That's an old Edward R. Murrow trick from the good old days of news. So
you don't get that anymore. You don't get newsreaders smoking on camera.
No, nobody smokes on camera anymore. If you go back the good old days, Hollywood in the 50s and whatnot, everybody had a cigarette in their mouth.
Well, that's just, if Brexit happens and it's a hard Brexit, everybody will be smoking on camera again. It will be the good old days.
There you go. Except in the good old days where they're trying to get American cigarettes or whatever, like World War II rationing and stuff like that. So we got to see a little bit of Nigel and a little bit of a few of these other MPs and various important people who are discussing this problematic situation. But then in another part of Europe, we have more of the same old shit going down, and another person who has emerged from the sort of like a phoenix rising from the ashes is Yanis Varoufakis, the Greek former Greek finance minister, who now says that he knows how to fix the EU and could do it tomorrow. I didn't listen to this whole speech yet, or this whole conference, so I can't really tell you exactly what's in it. But I did listen to another one that he gave, and basically he says a lot of the stuff that we already know is true about, how the whole situation was manipulated by Brussels, and they just didn't really have a lot of power to do anything. And I think that seems to be the same case with Britain and Brexit and everybody that tries to in some way break away from the EU. It's like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never check out.
Exactly. That's what they call it, isn't it? The Hotel Europa.
Yeah, is that what they're calling it now?
A case in point, obviously, with Greece, the party that Yanis was in, I can't remember the name of it.
Syriza.
That's the one.
Good memory. It's one of the few things that's still left.
Yeah. I mean, that seemed to be almost like a revolution. And then they got into power, and then all of a sudden it was like they were being controlled somehow. Like the EU must have something that they show people that suddenly makes them conform. Because the Italian prime ministers have done that as well. Mm-hmm. There's several technocratic prime ministers in a row. And now they've got this new, supposedly populist coalition that is not, they were threatening the EU with busting their own budget to pay for more spending, and they somehow ended up backing down mostly on that.
Yeah.
So the EU does wield some kind of power that we don't know about.
Yeah. Hold for a second. I gotta check my cameras. They don't look like they're running. All right. We're back online after checking our technicals. And you were talking about sort of the capitulation of not just the Greeks, but the Italians, the French. Basically, everybody, it doesn't matter who's elected, they, as soon as they're in office, they just capitulate.
Yeah. I don't know the reason why, but that must be a good one.
Yeah, I think they kind of get the riot act read to them on the financial level, you know.
Yeah.
You're basically going to get cut off from the euro, and you're going to have to, you know, establish your own currency. It's going to be devalued, and your economics are going to be toast, you know.
Yeah.
So I
think that's what we've been told over and over, but I think there probably is some truth to it, because you know they can do a lot of damage, that's for sure. But I think with the EU, no, we've got a technical problem there.
Oh, you do? I don't know.
No, the sound just broke up for a second.
No, it's running. It appears to be from my end, anyway. Sometimes I find out later, when I play back some of the video, that there was a glitch. Like, I had a glitch on a conversation I had with another fellow, and everything sounded right when I was doing it, but then when I played back the audio that my recorder put down, the left and right tracks were not synced, and so I was getting a wicked echo. I couldn't use the audio at all, so I had to pitch that in a read. Maybe we'll redo it at some point. I don't know, and I hope that doesn't happen with this one. That would be very disappointing. But I have more audio systems running for this one. I have backup audio, so at the very least on this one, I will get an audio tape. But I'm pretty sure everything's working, so it shouldn't be a problem. People like talking heads, but the audio only, when you get the MP3, I like to tell people, if they say, oh, I don't have time to do this. The MP3s, you can listen to them while you're stuck in traffic in the car, while you're outside gardening, your permaculture garden, while you're riding your bicycle. It's a multitasking kind of thing that you can't do with video. And so, audio is where I started. I started in pirate radio many, many years ago, back in the 70s. And I still love it. But video is the name of the game nowadays. Everybody's got their iPhones they're glued to. And, nobody reads anymore. Forget the fucking blogs. And especially my blogs. I go, 5,000 words, 10,000 words in a blog sometimes. The current generation has a attention span of a 140 character tweet. Or maybe they're up to 280 now, I don't know. All right, so one more. Well, actually, there's two more. So let me. I don't have a video up for this one, but it's kind of related to Giannis and the Greeks because, of course, Giannis's nemesis through their attempt to exit was Wolfgang Schäuble, who was the finance minister of Germany, and created the most problems for the Greeks in terms of trying to break away. But the Germans these days seem to have their own economic problems. They're all signs that they're going into recession. Their car exports are going down. And then Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Party is on the ropes. And Angela herself is going to resign. Do you have any perspectives from inside Europe about what's going on in Germany?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, in my job that I work in at the moment, I'm basically an economics editor for a number of writers. So I get like figures popping up on my screen 8 hours a day in front of me. So I see it constantly, and we're always waiting for trading economics and FX Street and all that to update their figures. So I've got a drip feed of data going in all the time. And at the moment, for the last few months, you get the consensus figure of what it's going to be before the data comes out. And everything coming out of the Eurozone and everything coming out of Germany in particular seems to be coming in below consensus expectations, whether it's like car manufacturing or consumer confidence or business confidence or, PPI figures, whatever it is. It's just constantly disappointing. So you can see that Germany, for sure, is on a downward arc at the moment economically. It's probably in recession, Obviously, recessions, we only tend to know about them in the rearview mirror,
Right.
or at least when they started. So we'll probably find out soon enough that it is. Italy is already in recession. France, for some reason, is just hovering above a recession. I think they've got like about 1% GDP growth a year at the moment on average. I don't know how it manages to hold up, France, because it seems to be completely paralysed by protests.
Yeah, the political issues, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I can only say that, a lot of those GDP figures from whoever's putting them out, I mean, they're heavily massaged. And, you just can't believe that stuff most of the time when you look at what's actually going on. And of course, that is another very important and probably the most visible sign that the whole European project and the political situation in Europe is coming apart at the seams, and that's the Gilet Jaunes movement, the Yellow Vests. Got some great video of the Yellow Vests. This is a great documentary series that's being put up. It's already up to like 19 or 20 parts, and has just some video that is utterly riveting in terms of street violence and whatnot. I mean, it makes, as powerful as some of the images were that came out of Occupy, with the police pepper spraying. Oh, we lost sound. Are you there? Are you hearing me?
I can hear you, but it's pretty distorted.
Well, we'll just keep going.
Okay.
My sound here will be fine. Your voice may not come through that well if it's breaking up. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, the stuff with the pepper spray and the cops beating on the protesters at Occupy, I mean, that was sandbox kindergarten stuff compared to the shit that's going down in France. And this is, months and going on for months. And, Macron is kind of doing the Marie Antoinette thing, let him eat cake. He flies off to Brussels and, eats with bankster friends. And nobody in France seems to want him in office anymore, but yet there he is, Has the Gilet Jaunes movement gained any traction inside Britain? Is there any sign that sort of street demonstration stuff might start to take off?
Yeah. Hold on, the sound is so bad. We could restart the connection.
Yeah. All right.
I cannot stand it.
All right. Let's terminate this call, Okay, and I'll call you right back.
Okay.
Do. Where the hell is the terminate button? Oh, there it is. I got it. Oh, looks like it recorded. Dooby-dooby-doo.
That's perfect now.
What?
That's perfect now.
Perfect! Perfect is good. Perfect is better than imperfect.
Yes, it broke up.
Yeah. Well, we're back. Okay. And while in the interim, while I went off, I checked my recordings, and it looks like everything's getting recorded. Not just the camera stuff, but the internal computer. So I think we're good. I'll just have more editing to do, that's all. So my question to you was, before we started breaking up, was do you see any signs that the kind of street protesting that we see with the Yellow Vest movement in France might migrate its way to Britain, and you might see a similar sort of thing to Gilet Jaunes in Britain?
I think that we could eventually. I mean, there's not much sign of anything like that at the moment. I think there's a small Gilet Jaunes movement here. There's just a few people. But I think that if Brexit is abandoned, or if it's clear that it's a rhino, Brexit in name only, then we're going to see some serious protests. But there was the first inkling of that I saw today. Somebody's written on the wall, they won't pay tax if Brexit doesn't happen. And people are sharing that on social media. So they're saying they won't pay their council tax. Because we saw this in 1989, that was the last big violent protest in this country. And that was when Margaret Thatcher introduced the so-called poll tax, where you had to pay your taxes, otherwise you couldn't vote. And that kicked off a big riot in London, which I actually saw because it was when I was at university. People in my student union were organising it. So anyhow, that was the last big thing like that. And I think something could arise like that. It's difficult to see the mechanism how that, because the students are all, they're all kind of, if you like, brainwashed at the moment with social justice causes.
That's a big problem here too.
Yeah, Brexit is really it's a kind of a working class thing. All the people that were kind of left behind by this big neoliberal experiment that we've been undergoing for the last 30 years, all the people that have been left behind since the financial crisis, which is the majority of people, we'll find that a lot of them, if not most of them, voted for Brexit, whereas all the universities and kind of journalistic people and the political classes and the people who are doing okay, they all voted to remain. So it's a similar kind of driving force behind what's driving the Gilet Jaunes. The people in France are kind of fed out. They pay the highest taxes in the world. They've got millions of regulations now. They just see their own incomes dwindling.
Really? Are taxes in France higher than in Denmark and Sweden and Norway?
Yeah, it's just recently it became the highest taxed country in the world. And it's very hard to do anything in France now without getting a fine. So people are just generally pissed off, I guess. And then, of course, as you just said, you've got the Macron acting like Marie Antoinette, addressing the people from his golden palace, and talking down to them, pretending that he's like one of them, and he, a bit of reform here and there might fix everything. But the French, they do protest a lot. When they're angry, they protest violently. And I could see it spreading, the example that they're setting. I mean, it's going to reach ahead over the next 3 or 4 weeks, because Macron has now blocked off the Champs-Élysées. So effectively, he's kind of shot himself in the foot, because that now needs to be protected and guarded by his riot police all the time. So all the Gilet Jaunes need to do is actually break in somehow through one of the many side streets and confront the riot police and get on top of the situation. All it's going to take is a few of them to climb up on the Arc de Triomphe waving a flag surrounded by flames and smoke and riot police running in all directions. And they would have claimed victory then, I think.
Well, yeah, the only caveat to that is I also read that the gendarme has been given the go-ahead to be allowed to shoot at the protesters, which to me says they're perilously close to civil war. You know, if that starts to happen, then I don't think there's any turning back.
No, I mean, it's already getting to that stage. I mean, did you see just the other day there was an old lady in France holding a peace flag in front of a bunch of riot police, and they just marched straight over to her, crossed her on their head, almost killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And this was video. I can't remember her name, Genevieve or something, I think. And then Macron was asked about it, and he basically said, "Well, she shouldn't have been in the way. She's stupid."
Right.
So
don't get out there and protest. You're in the way. And sometimes you wonder about people who get in these positions of power, and if they ever learn anything from history, and you know, understand the dynamics of what's going on. Clearly, you know, few of them seem to understand, you know, energy dynamics and you know, where we're destined for as the available energy to run our society depletes further.
yeah.
That is just completely outside their frame of reference. You know?
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing that almost nobody appreciates. That Brexit and the Gilet Jaunes and the Italian five-star movement, they're all driven by oil and our access to it. I mean, if you take Britain's example, we discovered North Sea oil, I think, in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started exploiting it, and it was up until 1969. This country was, you know, pretty much on the downward slope. The Second World War had caused a lot of damage. We were very much in debt.
Mm-hmm.
The 1960s was not apparently what it was cracked up to be here, but I wasn't there. So anyhow, we discovered oil in '69. We started exporting it and earning a lot of money. That peaked in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
By 1999, North Sea oil production was going down. By 2005, we were a net importer of oil, and now, you know, it's just trickling out of the ground beneath the sea. So, unfortunately, those 30 to 40 years, we built up an economy that was based on earning a lot of money from oil.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody used to living the high life, really. And now that is going away. And of course, the working classes no longer have jobs because all the manufacturing was offshored. The poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer because they're able to access the highly financialized sector which earns most of the money in this country. Mm-hmm. And there's no appreciation of that in the fact that it's a driving force behind people's disillusionment. Because Brexit, it wasn't really about Europe. It was just a protest vote, really. People were voting against our own political classes. Because even the dimmest person could see on television night after night after night politicians in suits telling them that they had to vote to remain. And they didn't know anything about the EU or care much about it, but they thought, well, if he's telling me to vote one way, I'm going to vote the other way,
Right.
especially because it's David Cameron. And then when it became obvious that the Project Fear, where every single celebrity jumped on the bandwagon, and every single politician, pretty much apart from Nigel Farage, was saying that we had to vote for Remain. I saw people that were registering to vote for the first time in their lives. They were desperate to kick them in the nuts.
Right. They were hammering it down so hard that people are going to there's going to be a backlash, blowback,
Yeah.
right? And so the blowback was Brexit, and then there's blowback to the blowback, and that's I think what we're seeing now, and then we'll see blowback to the blowback to the blowback once this one is this aspect of it is complete. But anyway, we got around to oil and energy and so forth, which is of course the driving force not just behind all the political problems, but behind our blogs and where they come from. Your blog is titled 22 billion energy slaves, which is a pain to the fact that every barrel of oil that we use gives us the power equivalent of, well, I don't know if it's 22 billion for one barrel, but when you add up all the barrels, it's a lot. And that business is going away, and there is no reasonable replacement on the horizon for it. Do you have any new thoughts? I know this is always a bear, and I myself have gotten out of the business of making predictions. But do you have any sense of a timeline for a what I would call a tipping point in the David Horowitz scenarios of something going so awry that many systems cascade down and do you see any of that on a timeline of when it might come to pass?
Well, I really think that there's going to be some kind of big spanner in the works in the financial sector within the next year to 18 months. I mean, I just can't see it limping any further than that. We've got kind of converging crises. We've got, even the mainstream are saying there's going to be a huge recession and it's going to be worse than the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So when they pick up on these things, then the horse has already left the stables.
Right.
Yeah, when it starts down, I think that's going to cause a lot of cascading problems.
Yeah, when it starts to hit the MSM, then that it's already a done deal. And a big indicator that they've been talking about here, at least on the financial level, is the inversion of the yield curve on the U.S. Treasuries. What's going on? Is there a similar thing going on with the gilts and so forth in Britain?
I don't think it's happening here yet. I heard it was in Canada, and of course today we've seen the resurrection of the emerging market panic. I think the Turkish lira was plunging, and the credit default swaps on that were just off the chart. People had never seen them that high before. So we've got Erdogan cracking down on what he calls currency speculators by basically forbidding the sale of the Turkish lira. So that's caused a minor panic. But as you know, the whole system is so fragile. It just takes one card to be pulled out. And if enough cards are pulled out, the whole thing is going to collapse. And the first thing you'll know about it is that you won't be able to access your bank account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's remains the to me, a lot of people, and I watch around the web, and a lot of people have the sense that collapse is imminent, or it's becoming more in their consciousness than it was before. If I compare today to when I started examining these issues back in 2007 or so, there's a much greater awareness. But the focus that I see in the recent collapseniks, people have come to it in the last couple of years or whatever, so they're very focused on the climate aspect and the pollution aspect and the ocean warming and the extinction events that are occurring. All of these biological manifestations of collapse, which are related certainly to our industrial culture, but they seem to have become less conscious or less aware that the proximal problem is not the oceans coming and inundating Miami, which would be a good thing, but it's how systemically tied together everything is by the financial system, and if the financial system takes a real hit, and letters of credit stop, and nobody's debt is being paid, and so forth, then the shit's going to hit the fan. Like you say, people won't be able to access their bank accounts. Transactions at Walmart won't be possible. Even if they can get their supplies in. So it's that stuff seems to me closer than ever. But again, I have made predictions on that, and the powers that be, plunge protection team and all that stuff, they always seem to find some new trick to pull out of the bag, like Felix the cat. And
they will,
Yeah.
They will. Maybe we might have a big recession, and it might be 10 times bigger than the financial crisis, but still, it's going to cause a lot of damage. But still, a couple of years down the line, there will be some form of recovery at a lower level of energy use and financialization. But nevertheless, things might look like they're getting back to normal a little bit for a while, and then we plunge again, like going down the steps.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as the way we're going to go forward.
Punctuated collapse or punctuated equilibrium. It's a downhill slide followed by a plateau, maybe a little rise, downhill slide, and so forth. It's not just straight, fast downhill. But I also often get into discussions of fast collapse versus slow collapse, or I think Kunstler calls it the long emergency. John Michael Greer calls it slow catabolic collapse. I see what's already occurred as fast collapse. I see fast collapse underway. If you look at where we are now versus where we were 10 years ago, and look at the state of people and the state of society, how much it's spun down in that 10 years, it's happening fast, and it's a boiling frog effect where people don't really grasp it, but if you're watching it and you're aware of it, you see just how fast it is, and it's just moving along, and then Hugo Vardy has this whole Seneca Cliff thing, and it takes a while to work your way up to the top, but then when you're on the downslide, it goes a lot faster. And, so I think it took us 150 years from the beginning of the age of oil to today. I don't think it's going to take more than 20 or 30 years to get right back to where we were in 1850 or so,
Well, and it's also, developed like a fractal, I think. In some areas, things look good, and in other areas, they look bad. But overall, the system is displaying signs of collapse overall. I mean, I walk to my place of work every day, and it's a 5-minute walk. And I get in pretty early in the morning. And the streets are full of homeless people. It's like a John Steinbeck novel, you know? And I only live in a small town. I live in a small town that's at the end of a railway line, so people do tend to turn up here. But if you talk to people that have lived here their whole lives, you know, they'll say that it's never been this bad. You know, there used to be like one homeless person at a time, and you know, people would help them out, and then they would eventually find somewhere to live. Now there's about 50 or 60 camping in tents, sleeping in doorways, and not just that, but there's, you know, a huge amount of like drunkenness and drug abuse. I mean, I live in the second poorest area in Northern Europe, believe it or not, you know, even though it's a holiday destination where I live, and it's very naturally beautiful. The fact of the matter is, there's hardly any jobs here. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of social problems. There's been long-term neglect. House prices are unaffordable for local people. So there's a whole host of problems here that are kind of glossed over. The whole place is a kind of a Potemkin facade, you know. It's kept looking very nice for the tourists, because it's the main money earner here. But behind the tourist facade, there's a lot of poverty and suffering.
Well, that's, you know, it mirrors the situation here. And it also, you know, in many respects mirrors the situation that has been the situation for years in the third world. You know, and, you know, places like Jamaica and Brazil and whatnot. You know, if you went to, as an American tourist, or even business person or whatever, you fly to any of those places, and you'd think everything is great. But right around the corner and right behind the wall or whatever, it was sometimes a physical wall, there was extreme poverty and people really living on the edge. And, you know, more and more, these are supposedly first world societies, places like the UK and the fascist states of America, are resembling that type of environment more and more. You've got a very small cadre of haves who still have and who grab on tighter and tighter to what they have all the time, and then the vast majority of have-nots who become more desperate by the day and take more desperate measures. And we have the same overdose problem, fentanyl use on the rise and whatnot. And then, of course, we're the shoot-'em-up capital of the world with psychos and with guns going berserk all the time. So, you know, those signs of social instability that are basically mental, and the mental state of the people living in these situations, that is obviously deteriorating as well. And one can only guess how low it will go before there's a tipping point there. But we'll see. All right. Well, we had a really good conversation. I enjoyed getting your perspectives as usual, Jason. And we'll definitely do some more of these as time goes by. You know, a couple of weeks from now, 2-3 weeks, we should have some idea of which way this whole Brexit nonsense is going to go, maybe. And you know, might get to talk about the fallout on it.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It'll look like the screen behind you right now.
Yeah, there you go.
That would be my road.
Yeah, and the architecture isn't that much different, right? You have kind of like that old style architecture in town, right?
Well, where I live is pretty low-rise kind of stone buildings, like old fishermen's cottages and stuff.
Yeah, I vaguely remember you putting up a picture that sometime back on the diner.
Yeah.
A really cute looking location. And, you know, if I ever can get my crippled ass on a plane over to England, I'd like to visit Monsta over there. You know, he did come over and visit with us
Yeah,
here.
a couple of years back.
Yeah, a couple of years back, yeah. And he had all sorts of issues at the airport, you know, with customs and with his passport and shit like that. Visa problems, but he did get through. And it was a great little meet-up. I was really, really happy to meet up with him in that situation. And I still would like to meet up with you in person sometime.
Yeah, that would be great.
You know, so we'll see. And
Yeah.
one thing I won't do, though, is I won't fly on a Boeing 737 MAX. that plane is
So would
a
I.
fucking lemon
Yep.
of extraordinary proportions. On the other hand, I would like to fly in an Airbus A380. I've flown on 747s numerous times in my youth growing up, but I never got to fly on a A380. And I'm kind of, you know, I have a dark side to me that really appreciates that technology, aircraft technology, and I have threads on the death of aviation that I've been running for months on the diner, tracking the various problems that the airline industry is undergoing and the doom
Well, it's
that
a little
they're bound for.
small anecdote, because I was just spent the last week in Spain, and I came back yesterday, and I flew from Malaga Airport in southern Spain, which is a pretty big airport, newly built. It's probably one of the biggest hubs in the whole of Spain. But as we were waiting to board, the entire computer system crashed for the airport, and they couldn't get it back on.
Ah.
So instead of scanning everyone's boarding cards, they had to manually check them. And then when we got on the plane, it was completely full, not a single spare seat. But then before we took off, the captain said, "This is a flight to Bristol. If you're not going to Bristol, put your hand up now." And luckily nobody did. So they had to do that on every single plane. They had to have people putting their hands up if they were on the wrong plane. Because all the computer systems had crashed. There was
Well,
nothing they could do.
Yeah, we have seen the booking system crashes here as well, and the huge confusion that results from that. And you know, that is an industry that suffers just about every kind of problem that you associate with complex societies and the failure of complex systems. You know, they're just overly built up, and you know, so many interdependent systems that often are no longer computer or human controlled. Humans don't even know what's going on. You know, there are programs controlling programs and so forth. There's so many layers that when something goes awry, nobody knows what to do. And you have the problem of irreversibility that David Korowitz also talked about in his papers, which is that, you know, you can't just flip back to doing everything on paper. All the systems that worked that way, there were many more people employed in the back rooms and so forth, you know, with their little calculators and whatnot, punching in the numbers. And you can't just flip a switch, just like you can't take away the cars and flip a switch and everybody gets back on horseback. It just doesn't work that way. You know, those systems no longer exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough of that philosophy. Yeah. All right, Jason,
Okay.
or Hep, as I prefer to say. We'll see you again And my friends out there in Doomerville, fellow collapseniks, that's all to do. And this time until next time, here on the Collapse Cafe of the Doomstead Diner. Hasta la pasta, gang.